You're locked in to the hottest station on the planet.
Resistance is futile. The revolution has begun.
You're listening to Rebelpreneur Radio, helping you break the rules and build the business you need for the life you want. And now, broadcasting his pirate signal
from somewhere beyond the status quo,
here's your host, best-selling author, marketing and media strategist, Ralph Brogdon.
Hello and welcome to Rebelpreneur Radio. It's the show that helps you build the business you need so you can live the life you want. I'm Ralph Brogdon. What better business could you get into than a business that is doing something you enjoy doing, making money, having the time of your life, and living an adventure all the time? What a great combination of things. If you are in a business that doesn't excite you, that you're not passionate about, you're not going to be committed to it. You're not going to be willing to invest the time, the money, the energy into that business that it's going to take to make it successful. So a really important thing to ask yourself is, how can I have fun doing this? Today's guest has really done this. He has achieved the dream, creating a business that is fun to run. I'm speaking with Jeff Bonaldi. He is the founder and CEO of the Explorer's Passage. Jeff's objective is to use his organization to help tackle the world's most important social, political, and environmental issues through adventure travel experiences across the planet. TEP partners with the world's leading visionaries and institutions to provide travelers with a more immersive and impactful travel experience so that guests have the opportunity to transform their lives through the power of adventure. Jeff believes that business can and should be used as a force for good in the world. Jeff, welcome to Rebelpreneur Radio.
Thanks, Ralph. I'm excited to be on today.
Really excited to connect with you and discuss what you're doing and how it came about. Before you got into the adventure business, you spent 15 years in the sales and investment management area of global finance. You worked at Merrill Lynch, at Citibank. That's quite a different background from what you're doing now in terms of environment. So tell us that story. That's got to be fascinating.
Yeah, it's as different as can be. And if you asked me 10 years ago if I had expected myself taking people up Mount Kilimanjaro, I would have thought you'd be crazy. I'm 42 years old. My story, I always like to start it right when I graduated college. When I was a senior, I actually built my first business during my senior year. It was a company called Sports Clip, and it was a product that was invented by my father, but he had passed away the day before he saw his patent come through. And I was 18 at the time, and obviously it was a tough time for me and my family, but I started school in a few months from then. And when I was a senior, I thought to myself, if I could do something with my life that had meaning, what would it be? And I really wanted to finish this off for him. So I built the company over my senior year, and we exhibited at the end of my senior year at a trade show at the Jacob Javits Center, which a lot of people who are probably listening know is the biggest convention center on Manhattan Island. It was a success. We had one of the busiest booths in the show. We had investors, we had marketers, all these people who were very interested in our product. And from that show, I was able to get financing and some investors to work on this product and build it out over the next few years. We had some initial success, but I would say it did hit a number of walls. And I got to a point, again, after about 2 years where I felt like I couldn't move it forward anymore. And it was a very tough time for me because there was such a personal connection to it because of my father that I had felt I had failed. And I ended up closing it up. And I said to myself, I will never be an entrepreneur again, and I will never do something, which is very funny now, right? But and I will never do something that I love again. And my sole focus will be money. So I took a pivot and I started going to school at night at University of Pennsylvania in a pre-MBA program at Wharton to get some classes because I was a political science undergrad. And I was teaching tennis part-time. I was waitering tables in the Princeton, New Jersey area. And I broke into Merrill Lynch Investment Managers when I was 25 years old as a marketing analyst. And that's focusing on the money, right?
Yeah.
And but it was a good job. I was excited at the time, and it's in retrospect, it's where I needed to be to have some structure and to really learn. And I spent a year in marketing, and then I moved over to one of the investment desks, specifically fixed income, as a junior portfolio manager. I was very, very interested and fascinated with economics and the global capital markets, and it was a great place to learn. So I spent about 2.5 years on that desk before I moved to Citigroup in Manhattan, where I became a senior portfolio manager in one of the investment groups. And I spent in total, I spent almost 12.5 years at Citigroup before I left. But it's interesting that about midway through that time at Citigroup, about a few years after the global financial crisis in 2008, I started to undergo a lot of changes in both my personal and professional life. I went through a divorce in 2011, and at the same time, the work that I had been doing in finance was becoming increasingly dissatisfying. I wasn't feeling connected to what I was doing, connected to who I was, and I didn't really know. I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I knew I wanted to find something in all areas of my life that I could connect deeply to, that I could wake up energized to and be passionate about. So 10 years ago, at the age of 32, I went on the first hike of my life, which is crazy to think about now and what I've done over the last 10 years. But that was the first hike. It was up near Bear Mountain along the Hudson River, about an hour north of New York City. And I will say that that day, everything in my life changed. And it was really three things. The first was the connection to nature. I felt a deep connection to being in nature. Secondly, there was a group of us hiking that day. And I loved that feeling of community that adventure brought. And then lastly, I was at a very low point in my life. I did not feel very good about myself at that point in time. And I reached my first summit. And while it was only 300 feet in elevation, for me, it felt like I was climbing Mount Everest and I had just reached the peak. And I got home, I was energized, I was fired up, and all I knew I was going to incorporate more of that feeling and more of that activity in my life. So I started climbing on weekends. I started traveling all over the United States, and then I went on adventures all over the world. And this is, anywhere from diving with sharks in South Africa to taking a horse up to 16,000 feet in the Chilean Andes. I couldn't get enough of adventure. And it was having such a big impact on my life, and it made me feel so different compared to how I felt within my day job, that I decided that I would start an adventure travel company.
So you're doing all this while you're working in New York City, the finance, the suit, and all of that. But then you're cultivating this adventure lifestyle basically on the side, until you decided to reverse that and let's go full force with this.
Yeah, and it's interesting. So I was 7 years as a portfolio manager, and I spent about 7.5, 8 years in finance as a sales manager. And I knew that I felt ready now to start a company again. Okay. And I knew it wanted to be an adventure company, but I didn't know specifically what it was. Another thing I knew, that starting a company is not that easy. And I had that because I had that experience when I was young. I didn't just take a leap of faith, which was a very, very important experience for me. And I'm glad I had it, because I know a lot of people actually will quit their jobs and then start their company and expect a lot of revenue to come in at first. But My experience, it does take some time to cultivate these projects and to build them out. So my promise to myself was that when my company felt strong enough and safe enough where it was generating revenue that I could just walk over to something that was thriving, only then I would leave my banking job. And I didn't know if it was going to take 2 years, 5 years, or I didn't know if it was ever going to happen at all. But I kept at it.
Very smart, by the way, which a lot of entrepreneurs, I think, when they are working in a corporate situation, but they want to start their own thing, and I think they get a lot of bad advice where someone says, you got to be all in, you got to commit 100%, and that means quit your job, burn all of your bridges, and basically launch out and just take that big leap of faith. And that's not very good financial advice, and it's not good business advice, is it?
I don't think so at all. I think there's a number of things that happen if you do that. Number one, I don't think a lot of people realize how long it takes to build a business, right? Mm-hmm. And it's my belief that it takes about 3 to 5 years to start making money, and more 5 years where you're making enough to support yourself. And I also am under the opinion that you don't actually move it along any quicker if you work on it full time, because it just takes time to learn the industry, to learn how you're going to make it work. And you're going to make so many mistakes that if you are relying on this new venture for income to feed your family, to pay your rent, you're going to put a lot of pressure on yourself, and you're going to make decisions that are not very wise.
That's right.
And another thing people do is they go the route where they get capital or they take loans out. So now not only are they beholden to banks or investors, it forces them to be back in the same situation they were, where they were in control, where there was someone or something was in control of them, like in the corporate world. And I think for me, I was okay with taking the time. I really wanted my freedom and autonomy out of this. During the financial crisis at Citibank, we almost went under as a firm, and I watched all my friends in their 50s and 60s get laid off. And I just remember saying to myself, I don't ever want to be in that position, because I thought, what are they going to do for a job? How are they going to earn the similar amount of money that they were to pay for their kids' college or to pay for their mortgages? And it was a combination, obviously, of things that happened over the years, but that was a big one.
Sure. Tell us a little bit more about how you turned that sideline venture into a full-time thing. What was the moment? What was that like when you woke up and you realized, I've got an actual business now that's profitable, that's thriving, that I can put everything into? What was that feeling like?
Yeah, so it started out with the idea process. Again, I knew I wanted to start an adventure travel company, but there are a lot of ones out there. And my whole goal was not to necessarily become a millionaire, but was to wake up every day and for my business to be a reflection of everything that I loved. And those three things are adventure. I'm a huge history buff. And I love these great stories in history where people have come back and do the impossible. I love movies like Gladiator or Braveheart, where people rise up. So I thought to myself, well, what if we could take clients around the world and show them history's greatest stories through adventure experiences, specifically in places where they happened. An example is we have a tour in Nepal called The Myth of Mustang, which was the first tour that we created. And it's based on the legend of the second Buddha that happened in the 8th century. And the legend is that at this time, the king of Tibet was trying to build a temple on a Buddhist temple on Tibetan ground. And every time it rose, it was just destroyed. And the elders said it was these local demons that were trying to stop the spread of Buddhism. So the story is that Guru Rinpoche, the second Buddha, came up through the mountains of Nepal and ended up coming to Tibet to help subdue the demons. And there was these great battles that were fought through the mountains and the valleys. Now, this is a legend, right? But I heard this story. I read it in the New York Times, and I flew to Nepal. And I started to go to the areas where apparently these battles were fought. And you go to them and you actually see remnants of the story. You go into a cave along the hiking trail, and there's a picture of a painting that's 1,000 years old of the great battle between Guru Rinpoche and the demons. And then you see a monastery, and if you look at the ground, it's built like the ground underneath is shaped like a demon's heart. And you see these cliffs, and they're bright red, and they say that's the demon's blood. So the local societies and cultures have embedded these stories within the way they build things, and with paintings and with other cultural memorabilia, where I thought, wow, this is really impactful. If I could take someone on an adventure, but weave this story throughout and show them physically, the culture and the story and the history, I thought it could be a more impactful experience than anyone else is offering. And for me, it would give me that energy, which is what I really wanted out of my life. So we essentially, I created 3 of these experiences to start, and we launched at the New York Times Travel Show in 2014, which interestingly enough was also at the Jacob Javits Center. So, kind of turning back time a bit. Yeah. But I created the booth in my head. It was an old explorer's den looking out into the Himalayas. I bought the floor at Home Depot. I brought my dad's old globe, a drafting table at Pier 1 Imports. I created the whole thing, and we had one of the busiest booths at the show. And then on the 3rd day, the New York Times management comes in and awards us best small booth out of 450 booths.
Wow. You crushed it. That's amazing.
And that, I'm standing there with New York Times management. They're taking all photos. They give us the award. And there are travel companies that have been there for 50 years, and American Express, big names. And I just knew I was on my path. Things like that happen for a reason. And I knew I was good at this, right? The tough part is that I expected there to be the phone ringing off the hook the next few weeks. I expected actually to not have to be in finance much longer than that. But, as this stuff goes, it's always, like I said, it's always a lot harder than you think. And it took us a year and a half to get our first sale.
Wow.
The phone didn't ring the first week. I actually almost gave up a few times. I encountered a lot of the same problems that I did in my first business. But I think what was a little different about this is I felt different about it. I think the first business I was doing for my father because it was something that he loved. What kept me kind of going in this business was that I recognized that it was something that I deeply loved, that I wanted to be doing in my spare time. And I think that's what, gave me the perseverance to keep moving forward.
Absolutely. Wow. What a powerful story that is for so many reasons and on so many different levels. The perseverance, connection to purpose. And speaking of purpose, we talk about problems on the show. What problem does your business solve? You are using your organization to try to solve some of the world's most important social, political, and environmental issues. Help us make that connection. How are you using adventure travel to solve these big world problems?
That's a great question. So, as I mentioned, we started the company out focusing on these historical adventures. In 2016, I had the good fortune to begin working with Robert Swan. And Robert Swan is a British polar explorer. He is the first person in history to walk to both the North and South Poles. And he's one of the leading climate change activists on the planet. And Robert had been running these sea expeditions each year to Antarctica, where he would take 100 young leaders from across the world, 25 to 30 nations, to show them what's going on in Antarctica in terms of climate change, to bring team leaders down there to educate them on, sustainability and renewable energy and leadership, and then so that they can go back and that they can become climate change leaders in their home countries. And Robert had been running these trips for about 20 years through his foundation and his company, and he was really looking to partner with a travel company to help run logistics and and help run operations. And a series of events took place. I originally met him while I was at Citibank, where he gave a speech a few years earlier, and we clicked. And I started working with him on these expeditions. And I through these experiences, I got so fired up about how adventure can be used to, again, bring these people together from around the world and train them and then unleash them on the world for these major issues. So we started with climate change, and then we started working with the primatologist Jane Goodall in 2019. So Jane's one of the leading conservationists on the planet. A lot of people know her because 60 years ago, she went to Tanzania to work with chimpanzees.
Right.
And we started doing essentially expeditions up Mount Kilimanjaro. But the few days before, we would work with her organization Roots and Shoots in Tanzania to plant thousands and thousands of trees at the base to help with conservation efforts, because there's been massive deforestation. And it's been a win-win for both organizations. And in addition, Jane was so kind to join the day before on two of our trips last year. That has just, again, it has energized me even so much more. And one of the things that I'm very passionate about is using adventure as a way to help people who have gone through trauma. And we have had so many people on our trips that have had some very, very difficult instances happen in their lives. And I've noticed that adventure, the aspects that I talk about, right? That connection to nature is a very healing thing for someone. A lot of people who have gone through trauma isolate themselves. So bringing people in that environment where they feel safe as part of a community, and then helping to build their confidence by putting them on a very challenging adventure. I mean, you should see what happens when these people reach the summit of Mount Kilimanjaro or doing a jungle trek with us deep into the Amazon. It changes them. The smile on their face, the friendships they make. They talk about, they see hope. And, what we try to do is to encourage them to take these experiences and to try to incorporate what they learn into their lives back home. And a lot of them have made some amazing changes in their life. And they've used these trips as a catalyst for helping their own healing.
Very, very powerful. You have so many wonderful layers of synergy working here. You're doing something that you love and something that is fun. You're making a deep connection yourself. You're helping the planet to heal, and you're helping people to heal as they get connected with nature. And it's all just, I really love the branding, the mission, everything about it is just really, really exciting. On the website, explorerspassage.com. That's where our listeners need to go to find out more. Explorerspassage.com. We'll have that link on the Rebelpreneur website as well. And one of the things that you can do on this website is follow you, Jeff, as you go into these different places around the world. What's coming up for you next? Where are you off to?
Well, we're currently in the midst of the corona. Right, the corona.
That's true. You made me forget all about that. It's like, when's the next adventure? And it's like, we're waiting for this global pandemic to get resolved, right?
Yeah. It's funny. Last year I traveled almost 180 days around the world, so it was a really big travel day. And this year I did get a little burnout, so I vowed to travel a little less, but obviously not this much less. But I do have a few plans, but one of them is to do a jungle trek in Peru. Which I'm very excited for. I do love Peru. I love the food. I love the people, and the natural environment there is one of the best in the world.
Excellent. Well, I hope that for everyone's sake that we can get back to normal soon, and that you can go back out leading your expeditions and taking people out on these adventures. I can see myself joining you. This is very, very exciting, and I appreciate you sharing your story with us today here on Rebelpreneur Radio. Any final thoughts or words of wisdom you'd like to share with our listeners?
Sure. Yeah, I touched on it earlier about how I had a day job and I built the company on the side, and I'd love to just reinforce that a bit. I spent 5.5 years working on this company on the side until I was comfortable enough to leave, to the point where it was thriving. And I actually felt at that point in time, which was 2018, that there was no risk in leaving to run my company full time. There was actually more risk in me staying in my corporate job. So I believe it can be done in a very smart and thoughtful and manageable way where it doesn't affect your home life. It doesn't affect your finances. And for anyone out there, that has some, concerns about maybe starting their business or they think it's risky, well, it doesn't have to be. So just, if you have an idea, go for it but take your time in it and enjoy the journey.
Excellent. Jeff Bonaldi is the founder and CEO of the Explorer's Passage. The Explorer's Passage partners with the world's leading visionaries and institutions to provide travelers with a more immersive and impactful travel experience so that guests can have the opportunity to transform their lives through the power of adventure. Find out more at explorerspassage.com. Jeff, again, thank you so much for being on the show with us today. I appreciate your business, your vision, and your purpose. Best wishes to you in the future.
Great. Thank you for having me.
You've been listening to Rebelpreneur Radio with Ralph Brogdon. Download the show notes and much more at rebelpreneur.com.